I could get everybody to sit down, we'll get ready for this meeting.
Everyone who can.
Yeah, I apologize. Looks like we're standing room only today. So welcome to the Energy and Environment Committee. I am not Nuri Martinez, our chairwoman. She's unfortunately unable to be here today. I'm the vice chair, and she's asked me to chair this meeting today. So I am joined by my colleagues, Mr. O'Farrell, Mr. Koretz. We expect Mr. Cedillo to join us as well. Ms. Martinez will not be able to be here today. So wanted to get started. We have a full agenda. We have 9 items. The item that I expect to take the most time is item number 1, where we're going to do some trash talk, and we're going to go through. And that is an item that is going to be informational at this point. We're not making any decisions on that item now. We're going to hear about it. So we're going to try to go through the rest of the agenda first. And so what I'd like to propose is items 6 through 9 are fairly routine, and unless there is an objection, I'd like to propose items 6 through 9 for consent. Colleagues, any objection? No objection. So items 6 through 9 will be considered approved on consent. And then we'll take up items 2, 3, and 4 together. Then we'll take up item 5, assuming no objection, and then we'll go to item 1. So we'd like to start with items 2, 3, and 4. Mr. Prieto, would you read those items into the record?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Item number 2 relates to a DWP report relative to request for authority to issue $167 million in tax-exempt water system revenue bonds. Number 3 relates to also a refinancing of revenue bonds for $1 billion.
I don't think your mic is on.
Shh, are these on?
Get the board. There we go.
Okay. And number 4, also a DWP report relative to the power system revenue bonds to finance a portion of the budgeted capital improvements. We have staff from both the Department of Water and Power and the CAO's office.
Right. And do we have any cards on any of those items, Mr. Prieto?
Cards? No, I don't believe we do.
Okay. Only on it, right. We have plenty of cards on item 1, but we have no cards on items 2, 3, and 4. So public comment for items 2, 3, and 4 is closed. And please.
Hi, my name is Peter Nguyen from Finance and Risk Control Division of Financial Services Organization. Items 2 and 4, they are authorization for the water and power systems to issue tax-exempt bonds to finance a portion of their capital budget for fiscal year 16-17. In terms of the budget, the debt service is funded by the multi-year rate increase that was approved recently in March. The projects vary. It includes reservoir improvements, water and power infrastructure programs, and various power supply replacement programs, and that also includes RPS, to name a few. Regarding item number 3, it is an authorization to refinance or replace existing water system revenue bonds, and generally speaking, that would be a savings when we take action on that item. And if you have any questions.
Okay, well, let's start with some basic questions. I mean, the first one, in essence, is refinancing $1 billion in existing debt. How much savings will the refinancing provide to the ratepayers in the department? I'm going to ask a similar question for the other bond measures as well. That's sort of a core refinancing question.
Generally speaking, that would depend at the time when we do the refinancing. Typically, for the past transactions, we would save around, the minimum requirement for savings is 3%. That's the threshold. But generally speaking, when we do refinancing, it saves some much greater than that. It can be up to 10% of the par that's being refunded, or 15%, depending on the market conditions that we're dealing with. Also, for the refinancing authorization, it is not necessarily for savings on refundings only. The department, on the water side, we do have about $325 million of variable rate debt, and those rate debts can be put back to the department at any time. So once we have the authorization in place, it would be to the department's benefit and time saving having the authorization ready so that we can move forward to change the mode to a fixed rate bond. So in that event, that would not necessarily be saving money, but certainly an action necessary to help us convert the bonds into a different mode.
Is there any risk, financial risk on this type of refinancing?
No. That normally we would need authorization amount in excess of the variable rate bonds that's outstanding, always ready, so that in the event the market, for whatever reason, that do not want to hold the variable rate bonds, then we can take that immediate action.
And the savings that are used, are they designated for a particular purpose, infrastructure needs for the water system, or?
The savings in debt service generally would be put back into the water revenue fund.
Okay. And I do want to get the ratepayer up to get that perspective as well, but any other additional questions, colleagues, representatives? If we can get the ratepayer advocate to give us your take on these. You guys can stay. You may.
Our recommendation is for future presentations of this type, for a recommendation that DWP in the future provide a summary of financial metrics overall that indicates the relative need for new financing, which is items 2 and 4 are for new financings to support capital spending programs, and item 3 is refunding to reduce the cost of existing debt. And I've attached for each one of you a chart of the typical financial metrics for the water fund and for the power fund. And they just indicate on key components how DWP stands at the end of fiscal year 15. I would recommend in the future it be updated for 16 and, if possible, interim measures mid-year.
Explain that last point again, but what the recommendation would be?
They provide updated metrics through the end of fiscal 16. The numbers shown here are projections rather than actuals. And when they come forward in the future, if they can provide updated forecasts for these major bond financings, so you understand how they're proceeding and how overall financial metrics will look with these bond financings.
And is there a reason why we're not using the actuals instead? We're using the projections instead of the actuals for 2016?
I think that chart had just not been updated yet. In addition, right now the financial information fiscal year 16 are somewhat preliminary. It's not audited yet. But certainly we can update and provide a chart, as Dr. Pickle recommends, in the future to reflect as we have the fiscal year information completed.
We're not recommending holding this up in any way. It should move forward. But in the future, this is important information for financial review of such bond issues going forward.
Colleagues, any additional questions on these items? We are taking up items 2, 3, and 4 on the bond measures. 2, 3, and 4 together. Okay? Okay, so thank you. Without objection, those will be approved, and we'll move to item 5.
Item number 5, DWP report
Thank you
relative
very much.
request for approval of agreements with Scapa for the purchase of renewable energy from the Ormesa Geothermal Complex Energy Project. We have staff from the Department of Water and Power as well as the CAO and the ratepayer.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Koch. I'm the Assistant Division Head in the Engineering Division of the Power System. Before you today is a power sales agreement and agency agreement that would authorize and designate LADP as the project manager for 30 megawatts of geothermal energy from the Ormesa project. This is about 34 miles away from the Salton Sea in the Imperial Irrigation District's area. This is an item that would allow DWP to provide this renewable energy and attributes to our RPS program and the mandated requirements of the state. This would be about 1.1% of our 33% by 2020 mandate. We are purchasing this through a power purchase agreement with Scapa, which is the Joint Powers Agency with 11 municipal utilities and IID. IID, or Imperial Irrigation District, is also part of this power purchase agreement. They are off-taking 5 megawatts, and we're off-taking 30 megawatts of this project. And it's a 25-year PPA, power purchase agreement, starting about a year from now in November 2017.
So what's the total amount for the power purchase over the 25 years?
It's 30 megawatts.
30 megawatts. And this is consistent with the current market rate for geothermal?
Yes, this is the lowest cost geothermal option that we had, including the transmission and energy cost. And so it's base load power. It's very efficient to transport over our transmission system since it is base load power.
And you said it's about 1.1%? Is that what you said of our overall?
1.1% of our 33%, so it's a good chunk.
Colleagues, any questions on this item?
Yeah.
Great. Well, this seems like a very positive step, and we're happy to support it. So we approve the DWP's request for authority to execute a power sales agreement with Scapa for the purchase of renewable energy without objection. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have done items 2 through 9, and now we will move to item number 1.
Item number 1 relates to Board of Public Works report relative request for authority to award contracts with the Zero Waste LA exclusive franchise system. You have staff from the Bureau of Sanitation and the CAO's office as well.
I think it's hard to hear your mic.
No.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, now we
I'll
can.
repeat that again.
So we're gonna start. We have one of our council colleagues, who's one of the makers of the motion, is here and wants to start us off with some comments before we hear this item. And just as an overview, we're going to have
Don't matter now.
our colleagues say a few words,
Yeah.
and then we're going to have public testimony, and then we're going to have a presentation from the department. Following that, we'll have questions from the council. So, Mr. Weezar, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Blumenfield, and good afternoon to the committee members. Thank you for having me early. I need to get to another item in the building, so I appreciate you taking me out of line. And first off, I want to congratulate everyone who worked hard to get this item to where it is. It was a little over 6 years ago that we stood outside this building to announce the Don't Waste LA campaign. And I want to thank Lane, the Don't Waste LA campaign, the Bureau of Sanitation, and the Board of Public Works for all their efforts over these last 6 years to help get us here. In 2010, Mr. Koretz and I actually introduced a motion asking to review the franchise model for the commercial and multifamily sectors. Mr. Koretz has been a strong proponent of this every step of the way, and I want to thank him as well and his staff for the work we did. When I chaired this committee between 2012 and 2013, we did a lot of work at that time to make sure that we put this out and got the best responses possible to achieve our goals. We were immersed in the details, and what I look at today in this packet, it certainly does that. We will increase recycling and waste reduction. There's a reasonable and will be reasonable and consistent rates. There will be safer workplaces through facility certification. There will be cleaner trucks and more efficient use of trucks. There will be economic investment in our waste infrastructure and accountability and reliability of service. I'm very happy that it appears at this point that we've met all the goals we set out to do 6 years ago. However, there's one goal that appears to be sorely lacking, and that is in the diversity of the participants. We have a business inclusion program in the city for a reason. We value and we want to encourage economic opportunity among all of our residents. Unfortunately, it looks like we got very poor results in this RFP. We set targets at 8% minority business participation and 5% women-owned business participation. No awardee has even come close to meeting those targets. It may be that this reflects an industry that isn't as diverse as we would like it to be. It may be that our business inclusion program doesn't have the teeth that we would like it to have, or does it reflect that the bidders didn't take this goal seriously enough? I don't know, but I hope the committee will seriously explore this issue before this item gets to council. When I served on the Board of Education for 4 years and I saw the multi-billion-dollar school construction program that was about to start at the school district, I asked for a 25% goal for small businesses. We heard the same responses. We probably won't reach that. It's difficult to find people in certain industries. But we got even more aggressive with our goals. We said that not only for construction, but we asked that all contracts in LAUSD set a 25% small business goal participation. Now, the LSD program, several years later, is achieving and receiving some awards for not only meeting those goals practically all across the spectrum, but also exceeding those goals as well. We often taunt and say that we live in one of the most diverse cities in the world, and we're very proud of that. That's our strength. And yet, when we look at the minority and women participation in these items like this, it is appalling and it's embarrassing, and we should not be proud of this. I, in this process, brought this up to several people throughout the city and participants in this process. And let me tell you just very honestly, I was disappointed in the way, the types of responses we got. It was dismissive. It was like it was an issue that doesn't matter. But I do think we should take this a bit more seriously and look at how our minority and women participation program is working, not only in this awarding, but other awards. We also recently took up the issue of our boycott in Arizona, and there was an exemption from our ban on doing business with companies headquartered in Arizona due to the anti-immigrant laws that the state has promulgated. Here again, I found that the way we responded was dismissive to how serious the issue is. In light of the rhetoric we're hearing in the presidential election, many advocacy groups that I asked, should we continue with this ban, they said absolutely. The type of environment that we're creating and the discussions that we're having and the hatred that we're creating towards some specific groups in this country, this is the type of boycott we should continue to support unless there's some real compelling reason. But here, what I saw was just dismissiveness. Does it matter? Are we really taking that seriously or not? I say this, if we pass boycotts, we should be serious about them and not just find an exemption each time one of these comes up. So thank you for your attention. I'm really proud of what we brought today. I'm proud that we are going to assist in being one of the most environmentally friendly cities in the country when it comes to our trash. But we can't continue to dismiss the people who live here and not provide those opportunities, economic opportunities for them when they come up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huizar. We have a representative from Joe Buscaino's office, Dennis Gleason, here as well. And Dennis would like to give you the floor on behalf of the council member.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, honorable members. Dennis Gleason from the office of Councilman Joe Buscaino. First of all, the councilman would like to acknowledge that this has been a lengthy process and thank the Bureau for the amount of work and diligence they've put into this. However, these are 10-year contracts regarding a core vital city function, so it is imperative that the City Council do our part and perform our due diligence and ensure the integrity of the process, especially as it relates to what occurred once zones were reassigned to different hauling companies. To that end, we have a number of questions that we would respectfully submit to this committee. They are in no particular order. What was the process for reassigning haulers for each zone once the winning bidders dropped out? Why were the processes used to reassign the northeast and southeast zones different than the harbor zone? We'd like to fully understand how the assignment was made. Why were the RFPs evaluated based on rates if the Bureau was going to ultimately negotiate the same rates for the entire city? 20% of the score was based on the rates charged to customers. However, the Bureau decided to standardize the rates and didn't go back to re-rank the bids. Why is this? What is it exactly that the council will have before them to vote on? And can the council vote on each contract separately instead of all 7 contracts together as a package? Did the Bureau audit each of the haulers to ensure that they are all current in their payment of AB 939 fees and the city's gross receipts tax? The point that Councilman Huizar just brought up so eloquently, why are the MeeBee-Weeby numbers so far off the board's targets for a business inclusion program? Why is the Bureau proposing that all franchise revenues be placed into a special fund, and what will be the purpose of that fund? Why don't the contracts include services like Christmas tree pickup, emptying street-side trash cans, or picking up illegal dumping, as other cities' franchise agreements include? And finally, this is more of a statement. Our alleys are in terrible condition, and we suggest that we should use the franchise revenue to fix alleys, given the nexus between the weight of the trucks and their use of alleys to service businesses. Thank you very much for your attention to this important matter, and we look forward to the responses.
Thank you very much. And I certainly ask the department for the questions that you've raised and the questions that are going to be raised in public comment for the department to kind of keep a running tally of those questions, and during your presentation try to address them. And we'll also be asking questions at the end, but I think it's the reason to do public comment first before the presentation is to give you a chance to hear that and to respond. So I have a number of comments, and we're going to, I think they've been grouped in that we're going to start with the waste haulers who have submitted cards, and then we're moving to basically to public comment, but they're all equal public comment cards. Each person, whether they're representing waste hauler or themselves, will get a minute, and I'll call you up one by one, and as well, some of the comments and questions you've heard, particularly the MeeBee-Weeby stuff, as particularly the waste haulers come to do their presentation, it would be a good thing to comment on that issue and how you as a hauler are going to be dealing with that issue directly. Since we can't engage in a dialogue with the public, folks who are coming in public comment, I wanted to throw that question out there as you come up. So we're going to start with Gideon Krakow, followed by Jennifer Blackman D'Souza.
Jennifer. Jennifer Black.
So it's 1 minute?
Yes.
Where's Jennifer?
Chair, council members,
Didn't you call Jennifer Black?
No, Gideon first, and then Jennifer Blackman second, and then Suzanne Passman after that.
Chair, council members, there's even more people here, I think, at this hearing before Energy Environment Committee than there were 5 or 6 years ago when we started this whole project. We've come so far. My name is Gideon Krakow. I'm a consultant working for Universal Waste Systems, the team that is slotted for the Northeast Zone. UWS is a long-time city contractor, highly experienced, honest, and its subcontractors, including many women, minority, and small businesses like me, are ready to serve our city. We, everyone in this room, have been working on this for years. We urge you to approve the franchises. They're carefully crafted. Fair rates, focus on customer service, the highest environmental standards, partnership with labor, and opportunities for franchisees and contractors, big and small. UWS is ready to serve, ready to make these huge investments in our city, ready to get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jennifer Blackman, followed by Suzanne Passman.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Jennifer D'Souza, and I'm here representing CalMet Services. CalMet Services is one of several companies that together with the Kazarian family, myself and my sister own and operate. Through CalMet Services, we provide waste and recycling services throughout Los Angeles County, including the city of Los Angeles. As owner of CalMet Services, I want to personally thank you for your leadership in ushering the Zero Waste LA system from conception through reality. I am here to express my support. I am proud of CalMet Services and grateful that the city of Los Angeles selected us to provide services to the East Downtown Zone. There are a couple of things I've learned in this business. One, every customer deserves the best possible service. And two, community involvement is good business. CalMet is a great corporate citizen. This is why, in partnership with the City of Los Angeles, CalMet Services will provide the East Downtown Zone with outstanding solid waste and recycling services, and CalMet will also be active community participant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Suzanne Paston, followed by Doug Corcoran.
I must have very poor penmanship. Suzanne Passantino with Republic Services. Good afternoon, council members and members of the E&E Committee. My name is Suzanne Passantino, representing Republic Services. And Republic is truly honored to have been a partner here in the City of Los Angeles with the City and the Bureau of Sanitation throughout our 50-year history here in the city and throughout this whole contracting process. We truly do believe that the shift to this franchise system is going to provide a superior level of customer service and efficiency. It'll ensure cleaner trucks and less trips up and down your streets, and higher environmental standards, which we know is one of the top goals of this whole process when it started. And more importantly, it'll provide equitable rates and service offerings throughout the whole city, making recycling and organics collection available for everyone. We do realize the importance of the business inclusion program and partnering with small women, veteran, disabled veteran-owned businesses, and Republic is 100% committed to increasing our business inclusion partners throughout this process and throughout the contract term. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Sorry for the name butchering. And I apologize to everyone whose name I'm going to butcher during this process. So Doug Corcoran, followed by Judy Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Doug Corcoran. I work for Waste Management. Two things. One, we urge you to approve the franchises as they are proposed to you. We see it as a rising tide of benefits. It's basically going to lift all ships, especially the consumers. They're going to love it once it's out there. Secondly, on the business inclusion program, we also are committed to continue to look into that, see how we can improve those numbers. You know, we went through the process, identified the folks that we could identify, but we don't ever stop trying in that area, and we'll continue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Judy Gregory, followed by Jay War. Or War.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. I'm Judy Gregory, and I'm with NASA Services. NASA's been selected to serve the downtown zone, and we're very thrilled and excited to be chosen for this zone. We look forward to serving the heart of the city and all of the new, unique offers that this zone has to offer. The Zero Waste Plan is exactly what the city needs, and the franchise system will set the city of LA apart from all other cities with regard to how resources are managed. It's going to bring green jobs, needed recycling infrastructure, clean fuel vehicles, less traffic in our streets, reliable services, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and zero waste services to all business. NASA Services has been in business for 60 years. 95% of our employees, and we have over 100 employees, are minority and women employees. We've also got many millions of dollars included in our contract set aside for minority and small business and women-owned businesses, including myself. I happen to be a woman in small business here in the city of LA, but we also are definitely going to be working to increase that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jay War, followed by Greg Loughnane, or Loughnane.
Good afternoon, Chairman Blumenfeld and the rest of the committee. My name is Jay Ware of Ware Disposal. I'm the general manager. Ware Disposal has been in business since 1968. Ware Disposal remains a woman-owned business. In fact, Judy Ware is here today, the president of Ware Disposal. Ware Disposal is looking forward to your approvals of these agreements. We've been an integrated solid waste provider in LA since 1968. And we've just installed new equipment for organic waste. We have an excellent working relationship providing compressed natural gas vehicles and compressed natural gas fuel to those trucks, as well as we have a proud relationship with the Teamsters, Local 396. As part of this process, I give you our commitment to identify future opportunities to participate with qualified MEBs, WEBs, and other certified businesses here in the city of Los Angeles. We, as a woman-owned business, will help lead the way to opportunities for our diverse zone after contract award. We look forward to working with the city as part of this innovative first-in-the-nation type franchise system. Thank you again if you have any questions.
Great, thank you very much. So Greg Loughnane, followed by Cheryl Lott.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Greg Loughnane, president of Athens Services. We're proud to be the highest ranked company of all the waste firms that have submitted proposals. We believe we were ranked first because of our major investment in recycling infrastructure and our superior customer service, and we look forward to being a partner for the city for many years to come. We strongly support Public Works recommendation before you today. These recommendations are supported by a certified environmental report. And to accentuate this point, if the recommendations are forthcoming to be submitted by this committee, Athens diversion plan will take 350,000 tons per year out of landfills going forward. We are, in addition, proposing to invest tens of millions more in the harbor zone, as well as in other processing facilities throughout the city. We are a local fourth-generation company with more than 250 employees here in the city. We are committed to working with minority and women business, and we'll be working with the Bureau to add even more of these businesses to our list once the contract is executed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Cheryl Lott, followed by Dan Ruffridge. Okay. What's your name again? Adam Bass?
Good afternoon. Adam Bass,
okay.
On behalf of
Picard as well.
CR&R. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. We would like to see the city go back to the last documented decision and assign the harbor zone to CR&R. LA San had clear established process when it assigned the zones, and when vacancies were created, the Bureau was to follow the process. If it followed the process of filling the zones the way it had with the other zones, the harbor zone would have been awarded to us. 4 times this process was followed. When it came to the harbor zone, it randomly assigned it to another proposer. We don't believe that that was a proper process. We also believe that pricing should be eliminated from the scoring as a result of rate uniformity. Pricing is irrelevant, and 20% of the scoring went to pricing when there's uniform price for all of the bidders. We also believe that the city charter.
Finish your sentence and go ahead.
Okay. The city charter implies that each contract should be voted on separately and independently, and that not taken as a group.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Dean Ruffridge, followed by Darrell Gale.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bloomfield and council members. My name is Dean Ruffridge. I'm Senior Vice President for CR&R Incorporated, also referred to as CR&R Environmental Services. We believe we are qualified to perform services under your zero waste policies and guidelines. We are recognized currently with the City of Los Angeles with 6 separate franchise agreements. Our Paris anaerobic digestion facility is the only operating anaerobic digestion facility in Southern California, and the City of Los Angeles has contracted with us for about 150 tons a day, and that's currently in operation. CR&R is a remarkable company founded by Cliff Ronneberg some 50 years ago, and he and his son currently own, manage, and operate the facility. We have over 1,500 employees, 1,200 vehicles operating in Southern California, and we're considered one of the largest privately held companies in the western states. We pride ourselves in never having lost a municipal contract in our corporate history. We appreciate your consideration for the Harbor District. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Darrell Gale, followed by Juan Jose Gutierrez. No, as I mentioned, we were going to go through the contractors, and then next on the list is individuals. And I take it you must be the first of the non-contractors, so.
Thank you. I'm the
welcome.
first non-contractor. Okay, my name is Darrell Gale. I live downtown, and I live in one of the high-rises in my neighborhood. There's like 7 high-rises for low-income people, and in all these buildings, there is absolutely no recycling. So there's probably at least, of the 7 buildings I know about, at least 3,000 people that are not recycling and just dumping into the waste stream, plastic and paper and items that could be recycled. The stuff that people get money for, they do recycle, but the other stuff doesn't. So it's a real pain. My previous landlord said that a blue bin looked really bad in the lobby, so he didn't want it in the lobby. And my current landlord says that, if we have blue bins, they're just going to bring roaches and rats. And I said, well, garbage doesn't. And I told both of them that it was a city ordinance, and they both just looked at me and shrugged their shoulders. So I have to regularly drag bags and bags of recycling up here to City Hall, with my walker, and, I'm constantly getting mistaken as a homeless bag lady, but I'm not. I'm just trying to recycle, and we need the zero waste here in downtown LA.
We do, although I should say, the renters, I was the author of a bill called the Renters' Right to Recycle when I was in the state legislature, which mandates that all apartment buildings, with certain exceptions, have to offer recycling. So we may want to talk with my staff afterwards and figure out why your building is being considered an exception. But somehow. I assume this is Mr. Gale?
Gutierrez.
Gutierrez, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Gutierrez will be followed by Raul Murillo, it looks like.
Thank you, members. I'm here to register my strong opposition to Republic getting any kind of an award. My opposition is based in the 2010 City Adopted Resolution number 10002 S36 in response to Arizona's passage of Senate Bill 1070. As Council Member Jose Huizar stated already, we have to take the city government seriously, and if you make a commitment to the community that you're going to oppose doing any business with Arizona-based businesses, we got to take that seriously. When you do your cost-benefit analysis, I hope that in that formula you take into account the public trust. And so I don't doubt that Arizona company Republic is a very good company, but it's still an Arizona-based company, and the policy should be and remain that no Arizona-based company gets any kind of an award. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Raul Murillo, and I believe we're going to be followed by Cheryl Lott.
Murillo.
Murillo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Raul Murillo. I'm a president of Hermandad Mexicana Community Development Corporation, member of the Full Rights for Immigrants Coalition. And I'm here today before this honorable committee to oppose the participation of Arizona-based companies in our economy. This is to honor the decision made by the LA City Council. Arizona made it clear their position towards immigration and racial profiling by the passing of SB 1070 in 2010. That position has not changed. Furthermore, they have openly opposed in courts administrative actions proposed by President Obama that could benefit our community. Honor your previous commitment to defend Angelinos and support our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Lott, I called you earlier, but was under the impression that you were switching your time, but please come forward, and then you'll be followed by Francisco Riviera.
My apologies for the confusion. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Lott. I am here on behalf of CR&R. Part of the council's intent in setting up the franchise system was to increase the number of contracting parties so that the city was not too heavily dependent on any one firm. Of the current large zone contracting parties with 2 zones or more, the percentage across the firms is standard, except with regard to the single hauler that obtained 3 zones, which includes the harbor zone that should have been awarded to CC&R. That firm alone now has 36.3% of customers in the large zones. If the Bureau reassigned the harbor zone in accordance with the process that it established when filling vacancies, then CR&R would have negotiated for that zone, and all of the other haulers with 2 zones would have a more comparable percentage of customers. For that reason, we request that the council review those contracts and understand why it is that the zones were distributed the way that they were, or assigned the way that they were. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Francisco Rivera, followed by Mayra Soto.
My name is Francisco Rivera, and I am a member of the National Central American Roundtable and also a community organization part of the Full Immigrants' Rights Coalition. And we want to express our total opposition, to lifting any part of the boycott to Arizona, and for the city of Los Angeles that has a tradition of respecting and defending the rights of immigrants, to reverse on this when the state of Arizona, they have contemplated the most ugly laws against immigrants. And given this time, really, we tell this committee that do not lift any exception or roll back any part of this law that is being established. Thank you.
Thank you. Myra Soto is next, followed by Robert Nodoff.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Myra Soto. I am a member of Pacoima Beautiful, a community organization focused on environmental justice in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, who is also a member of the Don't Waste LA Coalition. I'm here today to speak in support of the recommendations approved by the Board of Public Works in September for waste haulers who will service the new Zero Waste LA exclusive franchise system. As members of this committee, you are all tasked with the stewardship of our environment when it comes to the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the healthy preservation of communities across the city. The residents of Northeast Valley are particularly aware of the negative effects that pollution has on our environment because of the close proximity of our communities to waste facilities and landfills. For multiple generations, our communities, who are mainly comprised of working-class immigrants of color, have had to endure poor air quality and dangerous drops because of the way that waste industry currently operates. We encourage you all to move forward with the recommended waste haulers who have met the standards that will keep our communities and truly make Pacoima and the rest of Los Angeles beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Nodoff, followed by Richard Negri.
Good afternoon, Chair Blumenfield and members of the committee. My name is Robert Notoff. I'm the current director of the Don't Waste LA Coalition, and I'm here to speak in favor of the proposal before you. The policy set forth has made LA a leader, and cities across the country are actually following in our footsteps now as a result of this policy. The current policy outlines a pathway to achieve the lofty environmental goals we've set for ourselves, including diverting 100 million tons of waste by 2025. It will result in $200 million in new infrastructure across the region. And the proposal raises standards in the workplace, helping to improve what's currently the fifth most dangerous industry in the nation, which is staffed predominantly by and overwhelmingly by people of color. We also share the concern around the current lack of diversity for minority and women-owned businesses. And so we recommend that the city approve the current proposal before you while concurrently developing pathways that incubate opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses to grow within this predominantly homogeneous industry. And we look forward to working with the city to help achieve these goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Richard Negri, followed by Theresa Martinez.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members. My name is Richard Negri. I'm the director of the Southern California Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health and Safety. The Southern California Coalition for Occupational Health and Safety, which is a member of the Don't Waste LA campaign. Our organization focuses on providing expert-level training, education, and advocacy to improve safety and health conditions for all workers, including the most vulnerable. I'm here to support the LA Bureau of Sanitation's recommendation for waste haulers for the new Zero Waste LA exclusive franchise system. With Zero Waste LA, Los Angeles has the potential to become the zero waste capital of the nation and create good green jobs in our new economy. Workers who perform waste treatment and disposal suffer some of the highest injury rates in California. Waste management holds a perpetually high place as one of the most dangerous industries on Cal OSHA's highest hazard industry list based on the rates of non-fatal injuries or illnesses resulting in lost time from work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Theresa Martinez, followed by Marquita Thomas.
Thank you. Theresa Martinez, CEO of the Los Angeles Latino Chamber of Commerce, just a few short blocks away on Spring Street. We're located here. We have over 1,200 small business members. The population of Los Angeles is 49% Latino. It's probably a little higher than that. It's probably over 50%. And we have 332,000 based on the last census Hispanic-owned firms, based on the last business census here in Los Angeles County. We were very surprised. I am here today to express our concern on behalf of a 10-year contract with 5-year extensions without an opportunity for our small business owners to participate. That's too long to wait. Also, the City of LA did not adhere to meeting their goals, their diversity goals and women WBE goals, and we're concerned about that as well. Good faith effort. I understand there was a motion entered yesterday at a meeting that I just heard about, and that was a good faith effort. It sounds to me like a good faith effort. We oppose good faith efforts. They don't work. LADWP just did away with their good faith effort, and we were very excited about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Looks like Marquita Thomas, followed by Ezekiel Patton.
Good afternoon. My name is Marquita Thomas, and I'm the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. I'm here with several colleagues representing diverse business enterprises regarding the city's waste management contract and its need to include more women-owned and diverse suppliers in its subcontracting opportunities. While I commend the city for including the business inclusion program in the RFP, I would like to encourage the city as a whole to consider recent legislature AB 1678 and AB 53, which includes LGBT diverse suppliers and the minority spend for the the California Public Utilities Commission and national insurance companies doing business in California, respectively. And I recommend the city include LGBT business enterprises as a dedicated line item in its business inclusion program. I would also like to recommend that the business inclusion program be included in the scoring criteria of RFPs submitted for consideration. And finally, I would like to ask for consideration mandating an increase in the number of diverse subcontracting participation of the companies considered for the commercial waste contract prior to awarding the contract, as these companies will have no incentive to do so after the contract is awarded.
Thank you very much. Ezekiel Patton, followed by Shanae Rowick.
Good afternoon. Zeke Pack with the Black Business Association of Los Angeles. We have over 1,200 members also. I was at, Mr. Chair and members, welcome to be here. I was at a meeting yesterday where they talked about subcontractor opportunities chaired by one of the Public Works Board members. And the conclusion of the meeting was that they will go ahead and award the contract and then hope that they can get the diversity goals increased after that. The BBA do not support that. We support the fact that you should not sign the contract until we've made some nice headway into the minority business numbers on the contract. That should not happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shanae Rowick, followed by Angelica Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Shanae Rourke, and I am with the National Association of Women Business Owners, Los Angeles County. We represent over 500 and advocate on behalf of over 540,000 women business owners here in the county. We were made aware of a management consulting contract which was submitted to the board on May 25th from the Bureau of Sanitation. It was an award for $7.1 million contract over next 3 years with a possible 5-year extension. The business inclusion program goals were not met on that program. To the Department of Public Works, we expressed our disappointment in the do better next time approach to their business inclusion program. This is that next time for us. On July 10th, 2015, the Board of Public Works deemed that all firms were responsive to the business inclusion program requirements for the franchise system. How can that be when none of them met the goals? We are really looking for a change to occur. We appreciate the motion completed yesterday for voluntary participation, and we hope that the voluntary participation in increasing goals also includes the development of the minority, women, and DVBE businesses through programs that benefit our local communities and the fabric of our communities, like mentor-protege programs or capacity building for these people as well, for these businesses, to help these businesses succeed. Action, massive action is needed, not only commitment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And our last speaker card goes to Angelica Gonzalez.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to remind everybody that climate change is upon us and time is ticking and we need to act fast. My name is Angelica Gonzalez and I'm the Conservation Program Manager for the Sierra Club Angeles chapter, and we are a proud member of the Don't Waste Coalition. Our organization offers an array of activities for members, general public to explore and enjoy the environment for everyone. This is why we are very important to be part of the Don't Waste Coalition. We supported the passage of the Zero Waste LA exclusive franchise, which is set to make Los Angeles a national leader when it comes to high environmental standards that will protect Angelinos and the generations to come. Zero Waste LA provides the city with potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions caused by decreasing dependency on landfills, replace dirty fuel waste hauling trucks with clean energy vehicles, reducing harmful particulate matter, things that are really affecting minority groups. So I urge you to move forward and stay on a timely manner. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to all the speakers who came out today to add their input to the conversation. So next I want to call up the Bureau of Sanitation, our own Enrique Zalvadar. Mispronounce your name, Zalvadar. And you've heard a number of questions that have been asked. So in as much as you can answer them during your presentation, that would be great. And we will also pepper you with questions after the presentation is over. But if you want to start out with some introductory comments, or actually, if there's any members of the committee, I know, Paul, you were one of the original makers of the motion. If you wanted to start with a comment or two, certainly would welcome that, and then we'll get to the presentation.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank my partner on this issue, Jose Huizar, who is the former chair of Energy and Environment, did an incredible job on this, and without his efforts, I don't think we would be where we are today. And what that is pretty extraordinary. We looked 6 years ago with a vision to get the city to zero waste, provide solid protections for waste workers in an industry that doesn't always treat them well, to provide excellent customer service and predictable rates, and reduce truck trips, and reduce vehicle emissions, reduce organics and the methane that brings in landfills. And we are about to do all of those things, which is really remarkable. And as was noted before we've even done it, we have other cities that have jumped on board, as notable as New York City, that are trying to emulate what we're planning on doing. We're the model for the country, and we really need to be if we're going to accomplish what we want on climate change, because just doing it here, while it's significant, isn't enough. It really has to be a program that's such a model that it does get implemented throughout the country and hopefully throughout the world. And I'd like to congratulate Public Works, and I'd like to congratulate Enrique and Karen and Dan and the LA sanitation staff for all their great work and months and months and months that have been spent on this. So also Greg Good from the mayor's office, who's been one of the driving forces behind this, and Lane and Teamsters and NRDC and Sierra Club and all the folks that have helped make this happen. I do have some of the same concerns that Mr. Huizar articulated about not enough minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses, and also the concerns that Ms. Martinez outlined in her motion. So I look forward to hearing responses to that. At the same time, I do want to point out that this is a very important program to move forward, and this is a largely minority workforce that currently are not working in the safest conditions and who are in harm's way perhaps every single day, and locking in much better working conditions, I think, as soon as we possibly can is critical. So I don't want to see us slow down the process to solve it. I want to see us jump in and address that very quickly, because I think we can't really afford to do anything less. I will point out we We did have one good suggestion that I would echo in terms of what to do with some of the revenue. I think sanitation trucks damage our already terrible alleys, and I think there's a good nexus there, and I would love to see a fair amount of revenue devoted towards fixing our alleys, which I have to believe are some of the worst alleys in a big city anywhere in this country. So I think that would make a lot of sense. I also want to encourage us to look at transitioning from natural gas burning vehicles to eventually electric vehicles, because while they're better than gasoline powered vehicles, they're still a heavy fossil fuel user and certainly not perfect. So some thoughts and some congratulations. This is a very exciting day, and I'm glad we've gotten to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Thank you for being one of the original makers of the motion. And as we move forward, and we're going to ask lots of questions, but I do want to echo the gratitude that you and a whole lot of people have spent a lot of time getting us to this place. Before I was ever even elected to the council, this issue was in motion, and folks were working really hard on it. So it's been a long time coming, and I just want to, as we get into the weeds, not forget to recognize the hard work that you've done and that all the folks have done to get us to this point. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you have a presentation to give us.
Thank you, Chair Bloomfield, council members. I will start with just some remarks of my own, and then we definitely will get into all of the mechanics and the specifics of the process and the recommendations, the basis for the recommendations and the different iterations that occurred during the process. I simply want to touch on some points here with my remarks. The evolution and advancement of technology has brought sweeping changes in how we provide environmental services to our residents. The solid waste management industry has similarly evolved, albeit more slowly. What had been our industry's anchor best practice, landfilling, has been relegated to a practice of last resort and superseded by recycling and resource recovery practices. Each one of you in this committee has been a true champion of the strides we have made and the strides we need to continue to make as we move toward our ultimate goal of zero waste, where 90% of the city's solid waste, residual solid waste, will be diverted from the landfill by 2025. And our greenhouse gas emissions are reduced by 45% below 1990 levels by 2025. Mayor Garcetti's sustainability plan provides a great roadmap in us achieving these goals. The recommendations presented to you today, as approved by the Board of Public Works Commission, to award contracts to the 7 companies, service providers, and franchisees to be, under the city's exclusive franchise system, is a crucial component in our pursuit to achieve our environmental goals. It provides for an excellent system of collection that will minimize air emissions, miles traveled, and traffic impacts, while providing customers excellent, reliable, and accountable service at a fair and reasonable price. And very importantly, by having these service contracts in place and the franchisees as our parents, it will fully enable us and ready the city to implement environmental policies passed here locally and at the state level. Such is the case currently with organics processing. I am proud of the comprehensive, meticulous, and thorough evaluation work that my staff conducted, with the utmost integrity and impartiality in reviewing and evaluating the proposals for the last 2 years. Though we know that our work really began in earnest 6 years ago, when Councilmember Huizar and Koretz, as was noted earlier, introduced their motion. You have also clearly noted that while our recommended contracts meet with the letter of the city's business inclusion program policy when it comes to subcontractor participation in its various categories, in particular MEB, WEB, they fall short in meeting the spirit of the policy. As you know, yesterday Councilmember Martinez introduced a motion asking our department work diligently with the solid waste industry as a whole and the franchisees to be individually to pursue subcontracting participation opportunities so that the face of diversity of the city is more and more reflective in this industry. With 2 of the recommended contractors, companies being fully or partially owned by women, as you heard, we have a good start. We feel that this is the opportune time, if not the ideal time, with the implementation of the exclusive franchise model, providing us with the perfect mechanism to work with each and all of the franchisees to be our partners in this endeavor. Through the leadership of Commissioner Heather Repenning, we began this preliminary work yesterday. We are confident that we can make significant improvements in this area. I believe that the companies themselves, as you have already heard from some of them, make a commitment to you that they will be our partners in this. For the detail and all of the mechanics of the presentation, which I think we're going with the long version, put on your seatbelts. It's about an hour.
But actually asked for a short version.
Okay. All right. Very good. Dan Myers of my staff will make the presentation.
Dan Myers, Bureau of Sanitation. I do have a shorter version than what I put our Board of Public Works through for an hour. But given some of the comments and questions that have come up today, I do believe we need a little bit deeper dive into some of the topics. So I will diverge a little bit mid-presentation to allow for a deeper dive into a discussion that's very important to the comments made today. So I'll let you know when we move off. But again, this has been a very long 6-year process, as mentioned a number of times. It began with Councilmember Koretz and Weezar introducing a motion for LA San to explore the benefits of a commercial waste and recycling franchise system. As a result of this long process, the limitations of the existing waste hauling systems were clear. To address these issues and limitations of the existing waste collection system, the Mayor and City Council approved a number of goals for the Zero Waste LA franchise system, as detailed in the franchise implementation plan. These goals range from meeting the city's zero waste goals to ensuring a reliable infrastructure to transfer and process solid resources collected through the franchise system. All of the approved goals are met under the franchise contracts. Additional RFP requirements. As approved in the city's Zero Waste LA franchise ordinance, LA San established 11 franchise zones. These zones were established using LA San's existing waste shed as a base. In addition, use other major geographical boundaries, such as freeways and major streets, to further delineate the boundaries. LA San even held a community meeting to discuss the zones prior to approval by the Mayor and City Council. The RFP allowed all waste haulers the ability to propose on all or multiple zones. However, as stipulated, that no one proposal could be awarded more than 49% of the accounts in the system. One of the concerns that we heard when we were developing the franchise system was that only the largest waste haulers would be able to compete for the franchise. Smaller hauling companies that did not own significant infrastructure were concerned that they could be priced out, since they would be competing with the waste hauling companies that owned infrastructure. To encourage diversity in proposals and proposers that could compete in the RFP process, the ordinance and RFP designated that 3 of the 11 zones could only be awarded singularly. They couldn't be bundled with other zones. We refer to these 3 zones as small zones. We refer to the rest of the 8 zones as large zones. In addition, the small zones were established around the city's own Central LA Recycling and Transfer Station, known as Clark's. All proposals were required to utilize this facility for the small zones, thereby allowing the proposals to compete on a level playing field for those small zones. Proposals. LA San received proposals from 15 separate companies. As discussed earlier, proposers could have proposed on all 11 zones. However, no one proposer proposed on all 11 zones. Some proposers proposed on just small zones, some just large, while others proposed on both large and small zones. Proposals were received from local waste hauling companies all the way to the large multinational companies. It's important to note that all 15 proposals were evaluated. Rfp and Evaluations. Given the size and the scope of the new franchise system, we knew that evaluations could not be an afterthought. We began preparing for evaluations as we were developing the RFP. The structure of the RFP supported the evaluations. There were 5 separate weighting categories in the RFP, each with a assigned number of points, adding to 100 points. Qualifications 10, customer service transition 25, service plan 20, diversion plan and innovations 25 points, and cost 20. Do want to take a moment to pause to address one of the concerns raised. Cost at 20 points. It was a goal of achieving uniform and clear rates citywide. We were not certain at all in the beginning of the process when we were developing the RFP that we would be able to achieve that. Very important that we understand the cost and the cost component as a factor when evaluating the RFP. It was actually only at the very end of the negotiation process when the contractors actually signed the contracts were we certain that we could actually achieve uniform rates. Rates and the rates impact were discussed all the way through up until the contracts were signed. So cost as an important part of their evaluation process.
Can you appreciate that for those concerns that were raised, it's 20% of the score, you could come in like you can lowball the number, or you could come in with an honest, highball, all full cost Cadillac proposal, and there's no impact on the at the end of the day, there's no impact on your standing in the placements or in the award.
Well, certainly that's a possibility. However, in our evaluation process, we didn't ask for just a cost, just a number in the proposal. What we asked for is detailed cost components, and we actually had our experts in rate setting. Experts do rate setting throughout California and the U.S. look and review those rates, and they were evaluated based upon what the final cost components they provided were, not just a lowball number. We were very concerned with that also, which is why when the RFP was put together, we actually looked at the individual cost components and went in and did a deep dive into each of those components before any scoring was assigned.
Okay, we'll continue with the,
Okay.
come back to the cost.
All right, continue with the evaluation procedures. The method of evaluation was the most exhaustive and extensive process I've ever seen. There were separate teams established for each scoring criteria, which means that there was one team for qualifications, one for customer service, one for service plan, one for diversion, and one for cost. The teams ranged from 4 to 6 members, including one team lead. The team members were made up, again, of industry experts from both inside and outside the city of Los Angeles. The private sector consulting staff provided research and technical support, but did not vote on scoring. There were no team members from management on the evaluation teams, and all teams agreed to confidentiality throughout the process. The evaluation teams were essentially sequestered the entire time during evaluations. Team members were not allowed to discuss the evaluations with members from other teams, and were not allowed to discuss the proposal with their own team members except as a group. To expedite the process, the teams did meet concurrently but separately from each other. They typically met twice a week, and when they weren't meeting, they were reviewing the proposals. Evaluation scoring. Each team was given a unique scoring input tool developed specifically for their scoring category. The scoring tool was the same for each proposer. The scoring tool had details for each scoring category and were further broken down into additional subcategories. In total, there were 70 subcategories evaluated in all. Each of these categories or subcategories were evaluated and scored by the appropriate teams. The teams were not allowed to see or had access to scoring from the other teams, and the scores were only available to the team leads until they were finalized. A couple things I'd like to point out, just to highlight how detailed the evaluation process was. There were over 70 separate subcategories evaluated, spread out over the 5 categories. And the teams discussed each of the appropriate subcategories for each proposal until consensus was met on a scoring. For the 15 proposals, this equals 1,000 separate discussions that were held in the evaluation process. Another highlight, just the sheer amount of time spent on the evaluations. We had 24 staff meeting for 4 months straight on this evaluation process, nearly 16,000 hours spent during evaluations. If this was equivalent to 7.5 years if just a single person was in charge of evaluating the the proposals. Sorry. Scoring and ranking. After each team finalized their score, the 5 separate scoring categories were combined into a single score. After scoring, proposals were ranked by 2 categories, those that proposed on small zones and those that proposed on large zones. Proposers that proposed on both small and large zones were placed in both rankings. As shown here is a graph comparing all scores, 0 to 100, of the 10 proposers that proposed on the small zones. Shown here is a graph comparing all the scores, 0 to 100, of the 12 proposers on the large zones. Our shortlisting process. After scoring and ranking the proposers, the next step in the process was to identify the initial proposers to move on to the negotiations. LA STAN started with establishing a short list for the small zones. As you recall, the small zones could not be bundled with any other zone. LA STAN chose the top 3 ranked proposers, NASA, UWS, and UPW, to proceed in negotiations for the small zones. After shortlisting for the small zones, we moved to the large zones. Unlike the small zones, the large zones can be bundled together. We determined that for the initial shortlisting process and for the initial negotiations, we would base upon a 2-zone bundle. This was done, as I mentioned earlier, one of the goals of the system was to develop new and improved infrastructure needed to support the program. The 2-zone bundle allowed us to enter and start negotiations and discussions to ensure that that necessary infrastructure development could happen while minimizing rates. New and improved facilities require significant investments, and to make them financially feasible, they require a sufficient amount of incoming material. A 2-zone bundle to begin negotiations provided sufficient quantities of material to allow LA STAN to negotiate new infrastructure while minimizing the impacts on rates. Moving forward with a 2-zone bundle, LA STAN required 4 proposals for the 8 large zones. LA STAN identified 4 top-ranked proposers to begin negotiations with: Athens, Republic, Waste Management, and Recology, recalling that NASA was identified for a small zone. The 7 shortlisted proposers were brought into the negotiation process. As with the evaluation process, Negotiations with 7 proposers simultaneously were intensive and exhaustive. The negotiations occurred over 12 months. Negotiation contracts of this magnitude required significant resources. Some technical?
Yeah, there's some technical problems. Let's see what I can do about it.
All right. In order to manage these negotiations, LA Sand developed 2 negotiation teams, one for the small zones and one for the large zones. The teams consisted, again, of city and private sector experts. However, the lead negotiators were the same on both teams. All negotiations were confidential throughout the process. LA Sand did not discuss negotiations from one proposer with any other proposer, and LA Sand staff did not discuss the negotiations with anybody outside the negotiation process. So this is the area where I'd like to go down to a little bit deeper dive. Graphically, it would have helped if our projector was working, but it's not. So we'll continue on through it.
Well,
so
the other, if we have the slides here, we could stop, do some questions now, and then come back to the presentation if that, when you get that fixed.
Well,
if that's,
certainly.
Okay, why don't we do that while you're working on the projector? And in fact, just in the question section, rather than have, since there's so many different topics, any one of us could sit here for, 20 minutes and ask questions. So I'm going to propose to my colleagues that we each ask 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll come back to you again, sort of a round robin issue, and just maybe just following up on the cost issue, since we were just talking about that before. That pricing was part of the bidding. What would have happened if you didn't have that in there? Would that have potentially affected the negotiated price at the end of the day? Is there a relationship there?
Well, it ultimately had a smaller impact on the overall negotiated rates, but that cost component and those components that were received, it did allow us, when we enter into negotiations with each proposer, to identify where it is that there were weaknesses in their proposal in terms of cost, allowed us to go into a much deeper dive into discussions on those individual cost components. As a matter of fact, it didn't stop with what was proposed. After that, each proposer then submitted a much more detailed cost pro forma that, again, that needed to match what it is that they proposed us. And from that cost pro forma, we went into a much, much deeper dive into actually how their proposed rates were put together. And from that understanding, allowed us to continue to move and narrow in on a more uniform rate, in this case, a uniform rate.
Part of what we haven't yet included in our presentation is that we had a consultant team with an expert on cost accounting in this industry that helped us validate on Councilmember Cedillo's question on, is this a number that was sort of pulled from the air and thrown in some kind of other strategy. So we went through that as well, the validation on the pro forma. From our perspective of understanding enough about the industry, and certainly with this expert person. So it wasn't just like we took the number and accepted it for what it was.
Okay. Mr. O'Farrell?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so a question. It's unclear to me, these submissions were blind submissions, and they were evaluated with the greatest possible attention to neutrality. There's been a lot said today about not reaching the minority and women's own business goals. How is it that you factor those goals into this evaluation process? That's unclear to me.
Let me answer that because I mentioned in my comments that there's the letter of the policy, and then there's the spirit of the policy. And we failed on the spirit of the policy. But the letter of the policy was met.
Well, I get that, and I don't see how you could have fulfilled on the spirit of the policy with the evaluation criteria. And I'm not actually criticizing it because there are certain legal requirements on this type of process that we have to meet. So maybe the two goals were mutually exclusive.
So the extent in which we can take into account the participation is the good faith by which the outreach is conducted and the participation that occurs through that effort. So each of the 15 companies, for that matter, because we went through a separate review and approval process of the business inclusion program earlier, all 15 of them met it in that they comply with the business inclusion program. That's the letter. And that's as far as we can go on the requirement side.
To your perspective, are the percentages that were mentioned accurate? 8% minority, 5% women-owned?
That we had identified as potentially available.
And that's accurate. Okay. Yeah. One other question before we continue the round robin. And if we were to select separately, so in other words, if some zones move forward and other ones don't, first of all, is that even a possibility? And if that's the direction that we went, how would that affect the overall package that we are expected to approve?
I will answer it from our perspective as a department, and some of these questions can tread a little bit into the legal, and Adina's here to help us out. But we're recommending that you approve this system.
Oh, I get that.
Which includes all of the contracts in one place at once.
I understand that.
From a theoretical and legal perspective, I do believe you have the ability to award individual contracts. Okay. Adina?
City Attorney?
Certainly. Adina Hopenstand, Deputy City Attorney. Yes, the authority for the council is to approve or disapprove the contracts individually without modification to them. However, I believe the can is being answered as to whether council can do so. There is a should question that's a policy one, and I think that the department and the Bureau of Sanitation specifically can address some of the implementation issues, the public perception and information issues, and just whether or not it's feasible programmatically to continue with the franchise system piecemeal. So that I have to direct to the
I get the complications that would, effectuate. But thank you.
Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the revenue from this goes to the general fund and not back to fund the program. Is that correct? And if so, should we not provide the funding for this to be an ongoing program with some sort of a cap and then the rest into the general fund rather than having to fight to fund the program every year, which doesn't really make any sense to me?
Well, Councilmember Koretz, we in our report simply call for the beginning of the establishment of a fund. That's all we went as far as to say. I will ask that the council and the mayor look at ensuring and securing the funding for the administration. Well, first the implementation, then the administration of the program so that we can, in fact, ensure that it delivers on the goals for why we're doing this to begin with. So it all begins, I believe, with ensuring that the funding is there for the duration of the program. So
I think that makes perfect sense to me, so I just wanted to be sure that that's what we're going to be asking for.
And just as a follow-up to that, and then I'll go to Mr. CEO next. I mean, it's a significant question as to whether it's special fund or general fund, but it's not a binary choice, right? I mean, we could have a portion go to special fund and a portion go to general fund, or even have a floating number depending on what the needs are. Could you evaluate? Could you talk a little bit about that, about the different options that we might have as a council and your opinion of them?
Councilman, keep in mind that it's an engineer responding to that question, and an engineer will generally say, yes, it's possible and we can do it. And so I will answer it that way, yes, I believe we can bifurcate. So ensuring the security of this program in posterity, and including the immediate timeline next year, the following year, and then having the other go to the general fund.
Okay, so this is an ongoing question, but certainly this is an important policy piece to this. Mr. Steele.
I know you're an engineer. You mentioned a couple times that you met the legal requirements. You've said that 2 or 3 times. What do you mean by that?
The business inclusion program, as you know, Council Member Cedillo, requires that companies go through an effort of, and John Reamer is here he was here, but it has a criteria by which they must make contact with companies, make a real effort to try to engage a number of multiple individual criteria that need to be checked off and submitted. It's very meticulous, and so every one of the companies met that, full compliant. That's the letter. I keep referring to the letter of the policy. We fully acknowledge that the spirit wasn't met.
Where is this criteria written? Where is it? Where could I look this up? Where could I research this? What was expected of them?
It's in various places. It's in the Contract Administration's website. It's in many places. I mean,
And so they just basically self-certify, and you guys took their self-certification?
It's more about reaching out to potential subcontractors.
Right. But the way you know that is that they tell you, they self-certify, they say, we were obligated to do these things, we've done these things, and here's our affirmation of our efforts, and we have complied with the letter of the law.
Yes.
Right. So it's self-certification.
Hi, Lisa Mowry, Sanitation Chief Financial Officer. So the MBWBE small business, it's not a self-certification process. They do have to be certified by, there's a variety of agencies that do that. So it's not just a case where they self-certify and we accept that. They are required to go through, do the outreach, try and reach all of the goals that we have, but they are only goals. They're not quotas. We can't require that they meet a certain percentage, only that they go through this effort, which is documented in great detail, showing that they did this outreach and they reached out to all of these companies, but we can't require that they select a certain amount of them.
And again, how do you know that how do you measure their efforts? How do you certify their efforts and their compliance?
So they provide the documentation of everybody that they reach out to. And that gets reviewed, and if they're not doing it correctly, if they don't submit information, then they don't get credit for it. And so it is a significant amount of documentation that gets submitted and does go through a verification process.
It's process-driven. It's not at all results-driven, which I think one of the speakers mentioned earlier, small business enterprise, where on that basis you can have it be required.
I see Mr. Reamer's here. If you wanted to add to the discussion on this, we would welcome your input at this point.
Afternoon, John Reamer, Bureau of Contract Administration. Enrique has pretty much laid out what we have. The letter versus the spirit. What is required of the proposer is to respond to the city's request to demonstrate adequate outreach. The department will identify areas of subcontracting opportunities. Using NISC codes that are in Bobbin, each proposer will be given a number of outreach efforts, if you will, that they need to comply with. So it depends on the opportunity. Let's say it's trucking, and Bobbin might say you need to reach out to 36 of contractors that are able to do this work. Because of Proposition 209, we cannot specifically require someone to reach out to a minority business enterprise or a women business enterprise. However, what we do look for is that you are reaching out to businesses in all of the categories, be it a minority or women or an other business enterprise. And the department, what they will do is they will look to see whether or not you did reach out, you did receive proposals or quotes, and then you did consider them. So that is the part of the department, to ensure that each proposer had an opportunity to present something to be reviewed and considered. You have some areas where you don't have as many, if you will, businesses to reach out to, which seems to be the case here. And when we say that, this work is done inside of the city's Business Assistance Virtual Network. So those who are registered are those who will know about it. Can the proposers go outside of the network? Yes, they can. And that may or may not have happened in some areas, but all the department will have will be the numbers that they were required. Be it 25 or 36 businesses, that's the number that's there. That's what they have to reach out to.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Another topic, the CNR folks brought up some questions about how the process was different vis-a-vis, or that they're alleging the process was different vis-a-vis the harbor zone. Maybe you could walk us through the process, the negotiation process after the withdrawal of Recology, of how you moved forward and, address the questions of that have been raised about the process being different and about the scoring, and just deal with that head on. Although that may be what's coming up in your presentation next.
Yep.
Is that all right? Well, then that's a perfect segue, since the computer is back up and running. I believe it is back up and running. To answer that,
you asked for it.
To answer that question and move back into the presentation. Our technology is up and running.
All right. Well, for why the technology continues to fail me, I'd actually draw your attention back to. Oh, very good. So, So during the negotiation process, it was determined that Recology and LA Sand could not come to terms on some key aspects of the contract.
I hear what I hear.
As a result, Recology voluntarily withdrew from the negotiation process in March of 2016. With the withdrawal of Recology, 2 large zones became available. LA Sand went back to the ranking list for the large zones. LA Sand offered NASA the option to move into one of the zones vacated by Recology. NASA chose to stay with the downtown zone, the zone that was the subject of negotiations at that time. With NASA electing to stay in their zone, LA Sand then offered the zone to UWS, the next highest ranked proposer. UWS accepted. Based upon the proposals we received, LA Sand determined that the remaining proposers were not suited for a large zone. And at that time, based upon the proposal, scoring-wise, we did feel that some of the proposers that proposed on the small zones that were ranked lower were suited and capable of, with LA Sands assistance, of providing service to those small zones. Again, in those small zones, there was not a requirement for infrastructure improvement. Those haulers would be utilizing Clark's as their main facility. So in the smaller zones, we definitely felt that a proposer with a lower score could provide service, but not for the large zones, and not for the city to reach its goals for infrastructure and some of the more complexities involved in those zones. So after the realignment, the remaining large zone was the harbor zone. Again, instead, after determining that we actually wouldn't move any further down the list, we actually went to the top-ranked proposer and offered them the harbor zone.
So effectively, anyone who was sort of below that 60 mark in terms of points was effectively disqualified.
Yes, in terms of providing service for the large zones.
For the large zones.
So for the smaller zones, we definitely felt that, again, with LA Sands assistance, how those zones were set up, that a lower rank would be possible for providing service. And also during the negotiation process, Athens agreed to make significant infrastructure improvements that are necessary down in the harbor region. So with that, we revised our short listing of proposals for the large zones and continued with negotiations with Athens, Republic, Waste Management, and now UWS. With the withdrawal of Recology, there was also impact on the small zones. With UWS moving to a large zone, and given that it could not be bundled with the small zone, it created a vacancy in the small zones. LA Sand returned to the ranking list for the small zones and brought Ware into negotiations for a small zone. So, also, unfortunately, in our process, we also, not long after Recology withdrew from negotiations, it was found that LA Sand could not come to terms with UPW. UPW voluntarily withdrew their proposal, as a result, creating, again, another opportunity for in the small zones. LA Sand again returned to the ranking for the small zones and offered CalMat the opportunity to enter into negotiations.
It's like a real moving target to me. Yeah.
Just don't look at the screen, you'll get seasick. It's focus here. So that really goes into a little bit more deeper dive into our evaluation process. How it is that we started with the 4 proposers, with Recology pulling out. We had to take a step back, pretty much go through a realignment of zones, allowing you an opportunity for UWS, again, only to participate in a single zone. Again, with our belief that they didn't possess the ability to, again, participate in a bundle. And in the city's best interest, going back to Athens as the highest ranked proposer. So it does get us back.
And when you went back to them, was there any issue, because it was also brought up, this question of having 2 zones versus 3 zones, is there anything significant about each group having maximum of 2 zones?
There is not something significant about having more than 2 zones, other than the fact that the entire goal of the of bringing proposers in and negotiating on a bundle of zones was for us to have the ability to negotiate for additional infrastructure. I mean, that's why we brought 4 in with a 2-zone bundle to start with. By going back to Athens and offering an additional 3rd zone, that actually allowed us to, again, increase the infrastructure that's needed for the process. So again, if we go to spirit, the spirit of the negotiations and starting with the 2 zones really was focused on the additional infrastructure needs. And we achieved that through our final recommendation of zones. But the alignment, which I'll get to right now, is of how the waste haulers were assigned to each zone. There's definite methodology associated to that, so I'll get to that. Not so I get too far off track. In our negotiations and our negotiation process, if that's where I am right now. Nope. So on page 17 of the actual handouts you do have, we'll talk about the recommendations for zone awards. The zone assignments, again, it was a very long and iterative process to actually determine where a hauler was best fitted to meet the city's needs. And there were multiple factors that were considered. The zone or zones that LA San recommended for award to each proposer was based first on their ranking. The proposer with the highest ranking received the largest award of zones based upon the number of accounts. In addition to that, the proximity to and the availability of new infrastructure were also factors in zone assignments. I'll talk about this further on the next slide. Again, LA San recommended an award to NASA for the downtown zone, Ware for the southeast, and CalMat for the east downtown. These recommendations for zone awards were primarily based upon the ranking of the proposers and the size of their zones. Again, there's not an infrastructure component to the small zones. Although the downtown zone does appear to have slightly less accounts than the southeast zone, it does not account for all the significant growth that's currently taking place in downtown. For the large zones, as you can see, the proposers with the highest ranking received the largest number of overall accounts. For example, Athens, the highest ranked proposer, received the largest number of accounts. But in addition to ranking, proposers' existing or proposed infrastructure played a factor into which zone or zones they were being recommended for. Again, taking Athens as an example, they were placed in West LA in the North Central zone. This is due to basically how the material flows in those 2 zones. Much of the material out of those zones from Athens will flow east to their existing and proposed facilities in the east, or to the north to their new recycling facility in North Valley. And again, as far as their assignment in the harbor, they propose significant infrastructure in the harbor area. Now I'd like to move on to some of the highlights that are included in the contract. The city will reach its zero waste goals through the franchise system. Franchisees are required to reduce disposal from landfills by 1 million tons annually by 2025. All customers will receive a blue bin as part of their basic level of service. All contracts contain strict customer service standards, with examples including standards for having a customer service center in every zone and notification standards. Contractors also contain strict performance standards. There are limits to fulfill service requests, time limits to fulfill service requests, such as requests for additional pickup or missed pickup. All customer service and performance standards are supported by penalties set forth in the contract for not meeting the city standards. LA Sands Customer Care Center is the first point of contact for all customer inquiries or complaints. LA Sands Customer Care Center will intake and track all customer inquiries, and the city and the franchisees will have an integrated system so that all service requests will flow seamlessly from one system to another. The service requests generated from the LA Sands Customer Care Center will get updated in the franchisees customer center, and as those requests are fulfilled, they will be updated in the city system. This program will bring over $200 million in new infrastructure improvements in the region to meet the needs of the franchise system. To improve air quality citywide, LA San requires new clean fuel vehicles for all solid waste collection. The system will result in reduced traffic on our city streets. The contracts contain citywide maximum rates. These maximum rates were established, as Enrique spoke earlier, through an exhaustive analysis of proposer-provided cost data and known industry standards. Industry experts with a combined 80 years of experience in waste system analysis negotiated the contracted maximum rates. It is also important to note that rates will change predictably throughout the term of the contract. All rate increase methodologies are set in the contract, including maximum annual caps. The services provided under the Zero Waste LA system is truly what sets us apart. The rates are inclusive of many services. Rates include blue bin collection, and that is unlimited size of blue bins collected at the same frequency as their black bin. Contracts include material reuse and food rescue. It also includes free annual bin cleaning and graffiti removal. We found through the process that what often drives customer bills up are all the extra services that are tacked on. The contracts detail what extra services can be added to the rates, and the franchise contractors cannot charge customers for services not detailed in the contract. I'm sorry, we are getting to the end, a lot longer than 20 minutes. LA San will work closely with each franchise hauler to ensure a smooth transition into the new system. The transition and implementation will take place over 12 months, will occur in 2 stages. First stage will begin at contract execution and include planning and procurement. During this stage, the franchisees will begin their procurement process of long lead items, such as trucks and bins, as well as testing the IT systems and developing a detailed account transition plan. Nearly 85% of the current customers are being serviced by one of the 7 franchisees, allowing us to meticulously plan account transition. The next stage starts 6 months after transition. During this stage is when franchisees begin their outreach to customers, provide them outreach, education, training, sign service agreements, and actually bring them into the franchise system. This phase will last 6 months, and all customers will be transitioned into the system by 2018. That really brings us to the end.
Thank you. I'm going to continue with the round robin questions. I think Mr. O'Farrell was next.
I think you were next.
Okay,
so you're doing. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I can ask another one. Just ask one.
I'll take advantage of this. Thank you. So you answered partially one of my questions, and that is in terms of the maintenance of the bins. And Enrique, you were here about a year ago in E&E, and I asked the question about when you gave it kind of a general update on how this was progressing in terms of the issue of illegal dumping across the city, a lot of times in front of apartment buildings, et cetera, and how that desire to get these franchisees in on the action of helping us with that was not written into the document that we approved. Is that accurate?
Accurate in the sense that it wasn't spelled out
It's not
that way?
included. It's not included, in other words.
It's not.
And so if we were to include that, that would be an additional negotiated sort of fee for service with.
Yes, although that's not to say, because, I mean, one is the indirect way in which, if you mean them physically actually helping with this stuff, because of the complexity, well, first of all, very few cities are both public and private. We're one of the few large cities, us in New York and maybe a couple others, who have public and private, and we want to keep it that way. We're not suggesting that any of that, but certain things that are of our universal nature, in which there should be no question as to when and how it ought to be provided, we have said that should be provided by the city. And so illegal dumping, and with all of the associated private property protections that come with that, as whether it's an item that should have been noted or under our protocols of 5611 and what have you, that became way too complicated to try to all have it done by others other than those who have come to know it well, which is us. That's why we didn't go that far, Councilman.
Okay. And in terms of the fees collected, the general fund, et cetera, will the CAO report on any fees collected, and in terms of where those fees will go and what those fees could be used for? In other words, if we are going to be receiving fees for services, the city, we're going to want to have an idea of what those fees, those monies could be used for. Again, to help address some of our main challenges facing the city. Again, we could get back to illegal dumping. Fees could be utilized for that, or homeless services. I'm not sure how large the universe of possibilities is for that. So will there be a CAO report, or could we ask the CAO to report on that aspect if it is relevant here? And I think it might be.
There will be, and in fact, the only plug that we have on that, Councilman, as both Councilmember Blumenfield and Koretz asked, is that we secured the funding for the administration of the program. That's our only interest. Anything above it, and which it's a call of the council and the mayor on a general fund basis, how that is to be appropriated. But illegal dumping and clean streets sure seem like a good candidate.
Okay, and then
Mr. Prieto, you want to talk about we have a CAO report coming? Sure. Is that
yes? So I want to confirm that in fact there is a CAO report that is forthcoming with regard to that matter.
Terrific. Thank you. To come to this committee.
To come to this committee, and that will be a discussion that we're going to have in this committee, and then obviously as a full council.
Right. So this is just clearly this is an informational report, and so the other follow-up reports will come back to this committee before they're synthesized into a final action of the committee to go before the council. Got it.
That's my understanding, correct, Mr. Prieto?
Yes, if there are particular provisions you'd like them to report or our office to report on, simply we could refine that here, and we'll make sure we report back on those matters.
I think in following up for that, clearly the crux of that report has got to be the different recommendations of how that funding is spent and what the meanings are and what the options are. We talked about from the engineering perspective, you could do a number of things. What we can do and what we should do are two different things, but something that the CAO report needs to give us a menu of choices.
Mm-hmm. Right. Bad alleys were raised, other.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll communicate that to them as well.
Great. Mr. Kretz.
Having dealt with this issue in two cities, I know it's one thing to say you'll have excellent customer service. It's another to actually have it. Not exclusively to this industry, but certainly true in this industry. How do we provide a guarantee that we provide excellent customer service through this process?
Well, we have several great things going on here in the city, which are part of what you have put in place along with Mayor Garcetti. My LA 311 is one of them. Access to service is 24/7. We now have a 24/7 customer engagement center or customer care center, customer dispatch center in sanitation, so we're there 24/7. And the tracking system has become so sophisticated, Councilman, and the follow-through. Part of the staffing that we have already brought on board includes field inspectors who will not only follow through on those types of requests, complaints, inquiries, but also do physical reviews and inspections of ensuring that, something as simple as a bin that's overfilling, that not happen. So that's why we call it excellent customer service, because we truly believe it's going to be that.
And if one of our companies doesn't wind up fulfilling excellent customer service, how do we plan to deal with that?
So I played the good cop in this. Dan is the bad cop. We have liquidated damages that trigger, if you want to talk about that.
Well, certainly. First of all, from a tracking standpoint, we will be able to track all service requests and service fulfillments. As the city is the first point of contact, we're developing a system right now where we'll be able to track and monitor all calls that come in, all customer inquiries, when they come in, and when they're fulfilled by our contract service provider. So we'll have the ability to track every single service request as it's come in and automate the process to highlight whenever a service request doesn't meet our standards. And there are standards set forth in the contract. I gave the example, if someone calls in and says, my bin was missed. The franchise service provider has a very small window that they have to go out and provide that service of collecting that bin. If they don't, we'll know by tracking the fulfillment of those service requests that it wasn't provided, and that is backed up with liquidated damages set up. And there's pages and pages of performance standards that if they do not meet those performance standards, there's liquidated damages. So we have up front the ability to track, monitor, and hopefully address any issues that a franchise service provider might be having, but also the teeth in the contract to actually, assess penalties for not meeting those standards.
Mr. Cedillo. Yes. Okay, just let me congratulate everybody that's been involved in this. This is incredible work to start with an idea 6 years ago, to begin to execute this idea 2 years ago, and to be at this point is incredible, and everybody is to be applauded. Obviously, those who are involved in the labor movement are satisfied, or else if they weren't, they would have been here telling you what all the problems were, and there would be any number of colored T-shirts here to tell us how horrible this would be if we went forward without meeting their concerns. The same applies, obviously, to those in the environmental world. They would be here in large numbers letting us know what more we should be doing, what people are doing in Europe or in Latin America or other places, and how we should do more. But they're not, because for 6 years you had an idea, you had a vision, you put a strategy together, and you executed it. For 2 years you have worked specifically with a very laid out plan, very thoughtful, of executing how you would get to this point. And that's great, and you should be applauded for that. The question, though, is what about in this great city that speaks over 150 languages, that has people from all over the world coming here for opportunity? What about that community? What about those entrepreneurs? What about those people in that community who look for an opportunity to participate in a proposal, $3.5 billion, that could create opportunity for them? Now, we know as a city we have a policy, a value that says we want 20%. Just on any given day, there should be 20% of any contract we let out should have that type of participation. We have, what are the numbers? 8%, MBE, 5%, WEB, 5%, SBE, 1%, EBE, and 1% DVBE. That's great. That's 20%. That's a great disposition to have. Arguably, it could be more, and arguably, it should be more. In the city, I know that
for all the commissions under the leadership of Amy Wakeland, the spouse of the mayor, 50% plus of every appointment to a commission in this city, every body that sets direction and policy oversight of the function of the city, every appointment is a woman. And so that's a question of leadership. That's a question of making a goal, setting a strategy, and executing that strategy to get that result. In this case, though, this is an area where we have failed. Because if you look at each one, if 20% is the kind of day-to-day walk around, what should it look like? With Athens, it's 2.71. With NASA, it's 4%. With Republic, it's 3.9. With Waste Management, it's 5.2. With Universal Waste, it's 3.95. With Ware Disposal, it's 0.86. And with CalMet, it's 0.29. And so while I recognize that these are goals and not quotas, all of us as an aggregate, I think we have the capacity through this type of effort that we've demonstrated, right, that's brought satisfaction to, let's say, for example, the labor movement. I don't doubt as a result of this that this entire industry will soon be organized at some point, and they are satisfied, because if they were not satisfied, Ron Herrera would be sitting right there right now telling us that we have not done enough. But that's not the case. And the same with environmentalists. We have done the type of work, made the type of commitment, and executed the plan so that we could get to where we are today, so that the environmental community is satisfied. And we agree with that. All of us, I think, are satisfied with that. I know my colleague and I just got back from Germany and Denmark, and we covet the day that we have those types of efficiencies. We covet the day that we have those types of standards being realized on a day-to-day basis, have that infrastructure in place. But we do not have anything near that, or nor anything that resembles that with respect to this community. I'm speaking not just for myself, but I know my colleague, Nuri Martinez, feels very strongly about that. She's not here with us today for good cause, but she feels strongly. It was extraordinary that Mr. Weezar would be here today to make this presentation. He feels strongly about this. I know my other colleagues who signed the letter feel strongly about this. So in this area, we are not done. Now, we have a question, and there were questions asked about how we maintain accountability. We have opportunity before us to do that, right? Because the contracts aren't signed yet. We're not done yet. There's different dates. We expect the contracts to be executed before this year's up. So there is opportunity, if there is will, by these companies to rechannel their energy, rechannel their resources, much as they did in interfacing with the environmental community, much as they did in interfacing with the labor community, to do the same thing with these minority communities. That exists. Now, there is a possibility that these contracts could be decoupled. And the question is asked, what's the policy consequence of that? That's a question for the council to determine. The other question, asked the other way, is what's the policy consequences is if we move these forward without addressing these concerns? In this city, on this day, an extraordinary move forward, what's the policy consequence if we don't address the concerns of women in the city, of minorities in the city, of disabled veterans in the city? That this city, this incredible city, doesn't follow the examples of, let's say, Atlanta, Georgia, that does an extraordinary job in making sure that every dollar spent by the city of Atlanta, Georgia, is touched by all these groups. And that's why they've been able to build and create such great economic development and growth in their minority communities in their city. And so that's what's before us today. Opportunities exist. I don't want to get out of perspective here. As I've said to everybody who's visited me, we might be 98% of the way there. But we're not there. But we might be there. And we have opportunity to do that today. We have opportunity to do that before the end of 2016. We can set some markers, maybe June 2017. We can set other markers, maybe July 2017. Those are markers that you've set for other aspects of this grand proposal to go forward. And so I applaud you, but I also want to recognize that we are not there yet, and that this is not something that can be taken lightly. It's not something that can be kind of, we wish we could get to it, or we wish we got to it, or we made legal compliance. But I know, because not every contract, not everything we do is without the controversy that we have here this afternoon. All the meetings we've been doing on buildings in this city, on all the great development projects, there's controversy from unions, there's controversy from neighborhood groups, there's controversy from political groups. They have not put in the time and the preparation and the expert execution that you have done to get to this point. So I acknowledge that. But we need to do that so that we finish this other component part to it. I think that we can do it, and I'm willing in my office, and I think the council members here are also committed to making sure that we get there, but we begin that process now. Thank you.
I think we certainly all share your sentiment on that. Do you want to, been talking about it a little bit, do you want to add anything to that issue?
Completely agree with the councilman. I mean, we failed in that front, and I mean, certainly being one of those who have made some difference in the diversity of this city, more than understand and fully grasp the breadth of what the councilman is saying. I think if you're thinking of something that we can begin, and we started working on this, and we have to do it in full diligence and immediately, so that we can still, I mean, just still try to keep to the timeline that you had laid out in the beginning, with the next meeting being on the 30th. If between now and then the 30th, working with your staff and you personally, those of you who will be so kind to help us think this through with the mayor's office and the commission and contract administration, so we can come up with a way that we can do between now and the 30th, so that we don't delay your consideration of the matter. And if at the end there's no satisfaction for you on that front, then clearly it's your discretion of what you.
Let's do this as we've talked a lot about this issue as a formal request. Why don't we have a report back for the next meeting on steps that we can take, obviously within the law, within restrictions. We all know we face the 209 and all those issues, but there are things that we can do. So we'll get a report back on that, and that'll be part of the agenda for. I don't want to speak for the chairwoman, but I think she'd be happy to have that as part of the agenda for the next meeting on November 30th. So.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, so,
what her motion says?
That's true. So that's pretty easy to speak for. So we'll have that formally as a report back on the 30th.
And along those lines, Mr. Chair, just I'm thinking with all that's been said, is that it'd be good to get an idea on the staffing levels that the potential awardees have to ramp up on in order to satisfy the requirements of the contract. That could be a way to inform us on greater inclusion and diversity. And again, within the bounds of Prop 209, that could be helpful information to have a better understanding of.
Very good.
I know the hour is getting late. Why don't we sort of move to the lightning round? I'm going to ask you a couple of different questions we haven't touched on, and we'll just do quick answers, and we'll go through anyone else who has sort of the quicker questions. For one thing, we were talking about technology. You and I have talked about this issue. I did a motion today about Big Belly and how technology can be added to the process, something we learned about on the trip, sensors in garbage cans that can tell how filled it is. How would we be able to integrate that into the waste hauler system moving forward if we should decide as a city we want to move forward with some of these technologies that might change the number of times that's required to go to a particular bin if you're using electronic sensor or something to that effect?
Absolutely. I think you shared with us what you had observed on your trip, and you know, I said earlier that we have been somewhat slower in adapting and adopting technology, and that's a good example. I think the transponder and the radio frequency technology in solid waste and communicating back and forth, customer logistics and whatever, has to be more extensive. So we definitely can incorporate it. We are experimenting with it ourselves right now in sanitation, and work with the franchisees to incorporate it in this program.
Great. And along those lines, during the lightning round, tell us about how the system is going to be integrated into 311 system, because I think it's really important.
Yes.
So what we actually began in early 2015 is we actually established two contracts, and we've been working on the upgrade of the My 3LA 311 system to be able to intake all customer calls from both the larger multifamily and commercial sectors. A system that's specifically designed for them, and a system that is integrated into or integrated with the franchise hauler system. So we actually been working for the last year and a half on the development of that system. Accompanying that system is our own contract management system that will be able to track all the information not only provided by the hauler, but be able to go in and query the My LA 311 system.
And so it'll be up and running when the franchise starts?
Absolutely.
Great. When will customers see the difference in fees on their DWP bill, or will they receiving a separate bill from different waste haulers?
So they will receive a separate bill from the waste haulers, starting in July 2017 as they begin to be transitioned into the system, and they're provided all the services, their new bins, they sign their service agreements. That's when the new franchise system billing from the haulers will begin.
Okay. Questions for the lightning round?
I pretty much asked all of mine, but just something to take extra consideration of again is the 10-year contract length vis-a-vis the lack of the criticism we've heard about diversity of those involved in the process, and how those are directly linked when you report back. None of this is going to be easy to sort through and think about and come up with ideas. But I heard all of the speakers loud and clear, and take very seriously some of the very real concerns, especially from the minority business representatives. Thank you.
Okay. Chris.
Yeah, actually, just a lightning round point to keep in mind. I know we've had a big focus as one of the pieces of this on working conditions. And traditionally in this industry, working conditions have been pretty spotty and sometimes pretty dangerous. So that's one of the areas where some of our contractors don't necessarily have a perfect record, but have come up to speed and are making solid commitments to greatly improve. So I have to assume and ask that we have a process to oversee this to make sure that everybody who is making a big jump in the working conditions and safety that they provide, that we actually follow up and make sure that all those things are happening.
Will do.
We get those sensors, we get the big bellies.
So additional kind of lightning round stuff. Timeline for each waste hauler to develop new processing facilities?
The process will vary by hauler. There's a lot of different technologies. Some are new facilities, some are upgrades of facilities. But we anticipate within 2 years after the contract execution that all of the facility infrastructure will have been completed, but phased in that time frame.
And the outreach that's going to happen, is it mostly from sanitation or from the haulers, or how?
It will actually be from both sanitation and the haulers. The customers will hear from sanitation first in terms of the program. I'll let them know what will be taking place. And then throughout the process, the actual Haulers are required to have a certain number of staff at all times dedicated to outreach and education throughout the term of the contract.
We talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to get it out there. The threshold for dropping a waste hauler if they're failing to live up to the contract, and what are those steps?
Well, it would begin with the contracts are detailed in the termination of a hauler. We would have to determine that they are unfit to provide the service, and that really begins with our ability to track them. And we'll be able to track all of their fulfillment of all the aspects of the contract on a regular basis, as well as tracking liquidated damages and all of that would actually build up to any finding of a contractor unable to perform the service.
And we're losing folks. We're going to end very soon. Question, though, about the 10-year contracts with the 2 optional renewals for 5 years. Why those numbers?
Well, to start with, the initial 10-year term really necessary for us to secure the necessary infrastructure. The amount of infrastructure that's needed, not only just in facilities, but also the improvements in purchasing of the vehicles, purchasing the trucks, purchasing the bins. Those need a significant amount of time to amortize. We know that if we shorten that initial term up, what that translates into is higher rates because they have to amortize it over a shorter period, and there's less security in the development. So that's why the initial 10-year term. Giving us the option for 2 additional 5-year terms is just that. Obviously, a lot of work and effort going into the development of the program and the development of all the infrastructure. So we want the ability and the option to analyze at the end of that initial 5-year term, and it will be just that. We would have to come back here to ask to renew that contract, and we'd be able to go what is best for the city at that time.
And folks have asked me about this, the transition, when it actually happens. Tell us, is it something that gets phased with different areas, or is it all at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, the world changes?
It would not be, 65,000 accounts will not happen on 3 o'clock on Wednesday. It will be phased. The first 6 months after the contract's awarded is dedicated to planning that transition out. With 85% of the customers actually being represented by the 7 recommended franchise haulers, we have the ability to detail out a plan of how that account transfer happens from one hauler to another, and it will happen over a 6-month period.
I'm going to add one on. So the infrastructure improvements needed for the harbor area, the $10 million infrastructure improvements, how will that effectuate the haul contract there? Will it happen simultaneously, or will it happen before that route is in effect?
That infrastructure is still being evaluated by the recommended franchisee, Athens, of exactly where that is. As it came up later in the negotiation process, they haven't identified it yet. It's likely that it won't be in place in July 2017. But again, they're in the process of actively determining where that additional infrastructure is and the extent of it. But it will be rolled in as part of all the infrastructure improvements.
Thank you. A couple more lightning round questions, then we're going to end this, I promise. State mandate for recycling commercial organics. How is this going to aid in that process, since now we have that mandate?
Well, we have the mandate, and certainly that is the franchise to start with is necessary to meet that mandate. The infrastructure that is going to be built through this franchise program is what's going to allow us and ultimately our customers to have access to facilities to recycle that material. The the mandate itself is a mandate on the businesses that they need to recycle the organic waste. And that requirement is the tool that is one of the tools that our hauler is going to be using to work with the different businesses to get them to enroll in an organics collection program with the ultimate goal of meeting all the state mandates.
And in answering one of the questions one of our public speakers asked about recycling in apartments and condominium complexes, are the larger condo complexes going to be included in the recycling? Can we now say to everyone that no exceptions, everyone is engaged at this point?
Every single business, as part of their base level of service, will have a black bin for solid waste and a blue bin for recycling. That is the basic level of service for every customer, large multifamily, commercial, industrial.
And telling folks about the number of vehicles on the road. This is the other big question, one of the reasons why we're doing this. We have companies using separate vehicles for different commodities. How are the total number of vehicles going to differ once we move to this new system?
Well, what we have is we know that through the system of recycling that we actually do need more additional vehicles on the streets. A 3-bin system does require more vehicles. The system itself, the way it was put together, allows those vehicles to be routed in the most efficient way possible. So with a hauler having the concentrations of all the accounts in a given area, they're able to maximize the efficiencies on every single one of their routes. So as we move forward through the system of diverting or actually removing 1 million tons of waste from the landfill by 2025, we'll be able to do it in the most efficient way.
Great. Well, I could probably spend another hour peppering you with questions.
I thought of one more.
All right, but I'll let Mitch do that. Go ahead.
I'm just going to stay up with you, Bob. No, the question, hours of operation are governed by ordinance. Some of the complaints we get in the neighborhoods are, this loud truck is in front of my apartment building at 5 a.m. I don't want to assume anything, but the ordinance that governs hours of operation will continue and be monitored.
It's a great point, if I may, so you can take a breather. It's a great point because, I mean, in some areas, downtown, we have exceptions to that just because of the traffic impacts, what have you. But that we will now have the ability to also control the deployment, working with each of the franchisees on when they can be on the street, respecting the ordinance.
Just want to make sure there's not an unintended byproduct of this, and it sounds like there won't be.
Right, with some exceptions just because of traffic, safety, and other things.
Thank you.
Well, this is clearly an ongoing discussion. I appreciate you guys have been very thorough in the answers that you've been giving us. It was a great presentation. We're going to continue talking individually as we move forward, and we're looking forward to the report back next month or at the end of this month as we move forward. And this is, I think, really helped move that dialogue forward. And I want to thank you for all your work and for being here today. And we are going to officially hold this item in committee, so there's no action that needs to be taken. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.